Joining us today is Maxine. She is a friend. Friend, is that what we say now on Threads? She's also an essayist and has written several essays about Heated Rivalry. We have shared her essays on music after we did our music
Mhm.
episode, which was excellent. And so we're so excited to have you here, Maxine. Welcome to the show.
Welcome,
Thank you so
Maxine.
much.
Thank
Yes, I'm so
you
excited to
for
be here.
joining us on a Friday evening, no less, after a long day, I'm sure.
Yes, I'm super
Uh,
excited to chat with you all.
so, we always ask everyone their origin story, by which I mean their heated rivalry origin story. So, do tell.
Yes. So I was introduced through the show. So
Mm.
the show was released on the 28th, and I watched it on Saturday, the 29th. So from the very beginning, I'm someone who absolutely loves being there when the zeitgeist is being created. So I was super
Whoa.
happy to, be there from the very beginning, watched the first two episodes, and then read the first book before episode three. I'm definitely a romance girly. Like all these
Mhm.
books behind me are all romance novels that are there and
Yay,
have
me
many
too.
more piles around my apartment. I also just love sports romance in
Yeah,
general.
yeah.
So like I'm a Duke alum. And so really, and some of my close friends played professional sports and
Mhm.
coach in professional sports now. So I've always been a sports girl. I also am absolutely obsessed with adaptation. So I'm
Got
definitely a
it.
person who I don't need much convincing. Like if I see it and I'm like, let me check it out. Let me see. And it was only two episodes. So I was like, okay, let me just see these two. And then if I'm interested, I'll keep going. And again, I like being there from the very beginning. And I know there will be a lot of people for season two who will be doing that,
Mm.
with us.
I wanted to share something that is probably going to be very familiar to you. You talk about sort of this sort of like exasperated way of like explaining demystifying why heated rivalry is popular and you're like, "Hello." And I really liked this part of what you wrote. You said, "We've always known. We know what to read, we know what to write, we know why we return to romance again and again. We fight for more access for non-cis white hetero women authors. We champion marginalized stories and voices. It is no surprise that this queer story is being shepherded by women, being watched and rewatched and analyzed and adored by women. And you know why Heated Rivalry is popular? It's the genre. It's us. First of all, I share your exasperation. I'm like, yeah. uh,
Yeah.
Why would this not be popular? There's no mystery in it, but I'm
Yeah.
so glad that you're working to demystify it because I feel like this conversation comes up like, why do people like this so much? And you're like,
Yeah.
women especially, right? Like, and it's always like, yeah, we've always liked this.
Yeah, you just
Welcome.
didn't care to listen.
Yeah. And I just thought, though, the framing that you did about the stories that we fight to see and why we love as women this genre of queer stories. I loved that framing and I thought that worked perfectly as a, like an intro to the topic at hand, which is allyship, you know?
Yes.
So, tell us about like what that element meant to you.
Sure. So it was massive to me. I think we were really excited about, the primary couple that we have there, and then also, the secondary couple that we
Mhm.
have in Scott and Kip. But I think we know just based on these six episodes that we would not have gotten to the end that we did without the women that are in the show,
Mm.
right? The women are playing a really critical role.
Yeah.
In some cases, they are externalizing internal dialogue for us. So things that we may have been able to read about in the book. A conversation allows those things to come out. But also the women that we got in particular, right? The level of confidence, the level of self assuredness, right? The women were not a space where like they were figuring themselves out
Mm.
and
Oh, I
trying
like
to do
that.
something else, right? Like they were absolutely serving the broader story that was being told in a way that did not make them feel less compelling, right? In a way
Mhm.
that made us want to know more about them, right? It's like I
Right,
want to
right.
know, how are you so confident, to be able to navigate, for Svetlana the relationship with Ilya for all of this time, like I want to know what's going on with Kip and Elena and how they met and how they became day one friends, and I want to know about what's going on with Maria, kikiing in the back. I want to know, what's happening with Rose, in her career. And so it's a really testament to the source material, of course, or Rachel, writing these women, but also, Jacob Tierney coming in and saying, I actually want to strengthen them even more. I want to flesh things out. I want to get really, really, really strong women in these roles to help us understand that, these men are navigating their lives, but they need help. Right?
Mhm.
And
They
so
Because
need
they're
a
still
show.
men. Because they're
Yeah.
still men.
yeah,
At the end of the day, they
exactly.
are
It was like
still men.
they still need help, and
Yep.
so that part felt really real. And the
Yeah.
women just felt really real. That like they
Yeah.
felt like strong women that we know versus like another way of writing them where they could have helped, but they could have also felt a bit helpless themselves. And they definitely didn't, in what we got.
There's something so meta because in your essay you said it's not a shock that women shepherded the show in. And in the show, the women are shepherding the men
Yes.
into these really big realizations, right? I just think that's such an interesting parallel.
I mean, the show, as you said, like the women are not the main story, right? Like
Hmm.
obviously they're not, but they're like essential, right? They're providing like cover and safety, and they like challenge the men to like be
Hmm.
truthful and honest with themselves. Like the show flips this like usual script, right? Like they're not victims in the story, as you see in a lot
Oh,
of like other queer, stories and narratives. Like they protect relationships even when the men can't.
Who was really compelling, or who did you feel like you connected with?
I connected with all of them in
Yeah.
different ways, but I think for
Yeah.
me, it's absolutely Svetlana. I
Uh,
think mainly because like for me, she's who I was, or like a version of who I was like 10 years ago. So like 10 years ago, like my friends were playing in the league, right? So in terms of like literal conversations I was having with them, about the sport that they were playing, about who they were playing against. So for me, I'm
mm,
like, I've never seen that version of a woman as a friend of an athlete before,
That's very
and
cool.
not have it feel like, she's hanging on,
mm,
or she's there because she needs to be seen with everybody else. Like she isn't, we don't see Svetlana at games. We don't see her doing, what you would usually see for a friend of an athlete.
mhm.
And she's absolutely there. She's in his inner circle, right? When we think about where we see her connecting with Ilya all the time. It's like in his home, it's in enclosed spaces, right, where they're with each other, or that she's going to save him. In terms of like episode 2, where she's pulling him away, from being berated while he's dissociating. So for me, I think it's definitely Svetlana and Jacob Tierney's choice to flesh her out way more,
Yeah.
and add so much to her in terms of that strength, the length of their friendship, and so making that something that he's had for a really long time, and that she understands him. Something that I really like to point out is like the same amount of time that we see pass for Ilya and Shane, we see pass for Ilya and Svetlana. Right, like
Mm.
they're friends for that same amount of time, right? And if we're like, whoa, that's a long time, for Shane, it's a long time too, for Svetlana, and they've been friends before that. So, thinking about the time, how much she knows about him, the depth of care, and then just thinking about Ksenia coming into the role and just smashing it, the
She's
fact that we
amazing.
never hear her speak English in the whole show, and for us to say that she's a character that we've fallen in love with, she's able to see through the trauma and see through the CPTSD that he's dealing with, to say like,
Yeah.
I know who you are, and like figure this out. I know what you're capable of,
Mhm.
both in terms of hockey, but also in terms of your life, right? And I understand and I know my role, so you don't have to worry about where I'm going. I also think their relationship, still having sex as a component of it, but them not being in, a formal relationship, is massive in terms of representation and
Mm.
helping people to confront feelings that they have about casual sex and what that means, and how women feel about casual sex. So the fact that we meet her and pretty instantly she's like, I don't really care, like whatever. I'm
You
here to
know
do
me.
this.
She's
I
like,
don't
"You
really,
know
I
me."
don't.
Yeah.
Right. It's like,
Mhm.
I don't really care about that. And we hear her say that, right? Where Ilya's like, oh, are you worried? Or she's like, I'm not worried.
Right.
Like that's not what I'm here for. And she's never a woman who's pining after him, right?
Mm.
She's like, I know who you are. I know who you like. I know what you need. And I know you need to figure your stuff out. Right. And so, I'm going to point you in the right direction and let you know that I'm not going anywhere. And so I just think her presence there is so important.
Thinking about how she sees the relationship, you see those in those montages, her little side glances, like,
Hmm.
she is tracking their relationship. He thinks he's being so subtle, but she's able to understand like where he is. It's made very explicit in the scene in Russia during the funeral. She knows that he likes men, women, both, as he says. I just love that you only hear that at the very end though, but she's
Mhm.
laid the groundwork for that understanding the whole time. That scene in the hotel room where they're watching and that is one of my favorite scenes. Speaking of,
I love that scene. Yeah, I love that scene so much.
you could tell they're childhood friends, because they're talking in
Yes.
bed in Russian, and she's like, "I'd love to see you on a line with him." And he's like, "Well, why would I be on a line with him? We play the same position." She's like, "You can be his wing." I'm probably
Yeah.
butchering all of these hockey things,
Well, I
but
was like, "You did
but
it right."
she's like, "Me? You want
I
me? You
know.
would want me to be like his, let him have the center and me be like the side." And she's like, "Yeah, the people want," and you could tell like every part of that interaction shows the depth of her knowledge of something that is so important to him, that is like his fundamental like basis, that
Mhm.
she meets him where he's at. And she kind of is like, he's gorgeous, right? Like she knows that he
Yes.
knows whether or not she knows he's Jane, I don't know, but she knows that, Ilya's not immune to the charms of other men. And then when they fight, they're like two little puppies, like
Yeah,
that's how
it's so
like
sweet.
it's very sweet.
We said she knows him. She's the only person in his life who truly knows him from the
Mm,
moment,
Yes.
right?
mm.
Like the only one in his life. So she knows whether or not she knows it's Shane. I think she does because remember, and I think it was episode 2 when he's sitting and watching him do yoga, right?
Mhm.
Episode
Maybe four.
4,
Four,
4.
four, four. Yeah, four. Right?
Yeah.
She knows. She's like, "What are you watching?" He's like, "Oh, I'm so bored." She goes, "Mm-hmm." Like, like, oh, it's right
Yeah.
before that car conversation. So she's
Uh-huh.
like constantly trying to like pick.
So the first time she talks about Shane in particular is in the bathroom in episode 2, right? And so she's talking about him for hockey reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
Ilya
Yep.
has to like go through. They have to go through Hollander and the metros, right, to be able to get to the cup. So that's the
Yep.
first time. Second time she talks about Shane is exactly what you mentioned when he is watching that little feature on the cottage, and she's talking about how gorgeous he is. And then the third time, the time that we just talked about in Ilya's bedroom, she's talking about both, right? So by the third
Mm.
time, she's already starting to do both of that because she says like he's gorgeous and his hands, right? So she's talking about both things,
Yeah.
right? And then that goes, directly into them being in the limo and her doing that, and also the fact that she says Jane. Like she sees that name instantly, right? It
Mhm.
takes her literally 5 seconds for the name to show up, and she already knows that. That's before they really do anything. That's the not even the end of episode 1 where she's saying
Mm-hmm.
Jane, right? And then the
Mm-hmm.
next time we hear her say that is like 8 years later. And
Yeah.
so
Mm-hmm.
it is really important for us to to pay attention to that because she finds that information out super early before, Ilya goes to Shane's apartment. Any of that happens, she already knows the name, right? Even if it's a name that's like whatever, I don't have to pay attention to. It's a name she knows, right? At least for it to be on the phone, and then it keeps coming back, right? And she's figuring out when it's time for her to say it, right? When is it time for me to deploy the fact that I know this, the fact that
Yeah.
I've been paying attention. And so I love that. I love that the passage of time is not just with Shane for Ilya, it's also with Svetlana, right? And I
Yeah.
also love that in terms of and I don't know if Rachel did this on purpose, but I have to think part of it is like for Ilya, there's Shane and Svetlana, right? And for Shane, there's Rose and Rosanov, right? And so I don't think that that's an accident, in
Yeah.
terms of
Mm-hmm.
what's happening, the names, the
Yeah.
the people that they're constantly thinking about, the people that know things about them.
Given how very few people actually know Jane and Lily's name, Hayden being an exception. Like I wonder if it's like a subliminally he trusts Svetlana even before, he gets
Mhm.
really deep in with Shane. He knows that, A, she's safe, she's not going to get jealous of Jane. And B, like he's always hiding his phone, but with her, I
Yeah.
mean, like It was like,
She's
what?
not.
Yeah.
Right there. She walks
Exactly.
in.
It was like immediately she walks in,
Yeah.
boom, phone, it's like, whoa,
Yeah.
and so I
Yeah.
think that's an excellent way, to show us that like his guard is down around
Yeah.
her. Right. And
Yeah.
also that she's extremely observant, right?
Mhm.
Because it's not like, oh, the phone's on the table, she's looking down at the, they didn't do it like that, in
No.
terms of like really
Yeah.
walking it through. It's like something that's happening very fast, but you
Yeah.
see he knows, he's surprised by her being there, but it's not like, oh my God, I hate you. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
now we're transitioning into something
Right.
else, right? So
Yeah.
his guard is immediately down, realizing that it's her who surprised
Yeah.
it in the home, right? And then she's paying attention, right? She's
Yeah.
always just clocking like whatever's
She's
going on.
always paying
She's
attention.
always paying attention, right?
I think she's one of the more complex allies in the show because of her
Mhm.
relationship because again, even the dad says like they've known each other since they were kids, right? So like
Yep.
constantly following each other. So one of the most complicated because she knows him the longest. She knows exactly who he is. She also gives them sex, right? Like the physical affection.
Yes.
And not just the physical affection and sex, but also like that comfort. He lies on her lap. She like pets him. Like there's a
Mhm.
lot of like physical affection that he doesn't get from anywhere. Like the
Anywhere.
hugging, the softness that she gives them. And so she's the person who does that for him. So I think she's very complex. Whereas Rose, I think it's okay if we move to the
Yes.
next
Yeah. That's where I was
woman.
going to go next. Yeah.
Like Rose is like to me like is more of like I don't know if she's like intentional. She becomes an intentional
Mhm.
ally. I don't think Svetlana knew that she was going to be an ally. Like I don't think when they were kids like she realized that, right? But Rose like gets
No,
it. She's
but
this
you know what? Can I
compassionate.
make one point about Svetlana? I mean, we don't explore this at all because she's Ilya's friend. There are three of them were friends since childhood: Ilya, Svetlana, and
Sasha.
Sasha, right?
Sasha.
And I wonder what their relation, because she gives them space. She's like, I'll
Yeah.
let you boys catch up. She knows.
Yeah,
she
she
knows
understands,
exactly
yes.
what that's about, right? And I'm always like, so she was part of this like
Yeah.
triad where
Well, she provides cover for him too. I was like,
for
she
him
provides
too.
cover for
Mhm.
Sasha as well, right? She understands, the
So-
nonsense with him, and so it's the three of them, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what reminded me is like you're like I don't think she intended to be an ally, which I think is true, but she found herself with these two boys who are a little bit lost, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
both
Yeah.
of them. We don't know
Although
what Sasha's
Sasha,
story is.
I mean, he's in Paris now, or
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
Mhm.
he's living the life. Like but you're okay. You're right. I'll take that. I'll take that. But but Rose also, I feel like, right? She didn't intend to do this in some ways, and but also kind of like she's found herself clearly in these situations through like
Mhm.
most of her life too, right? Like
Yeah.
being in theater school, right? She's like, oh,
Yeah.
80% of my boyfriends were gay.
Join the club.
Join
And
the
so,
club.
join the
Yes.
club. But I love her so much because she understands
Mhm.
Shane before he even is, understands
Yes.
himself. And she creates space for him to like admit that to himself. She models graceful exit allyship. Like she gives him the
Mm.
opportunity to exit the relationship with his dignity instead of being
Mm.
like, oh my God, you're gay. Like, this is over. Like, you wasted my time,
Yes.
whatever else. Like, she's like, I know you need this and I'm going to give this space to you. So, what are your thoughts about
Yes.
Rose, Maxine?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I think, where Svetlana is, like, I know who you are. Rose is like, I'm giving you space to figure that out. Right. And so when I think of who she is, right, that's who she shows up to be, right? That person where, I will hold your hand, and, go wherever we're going. Right. And so really, and that's what Shane needs, right? Is just an opportunity to figure it out, have somebody who's there whenever he's ready. And the push that he needs is just that she's there, right? It doesn't need to be anything more than that. And I think that is all he needed in terms of being able to, admit things to himself and to her, which I love. And I think of, how he meets her. I always think of like entrances, how we learn people's names, I think is massively important. Something that I think about with film all the time. I'm always paying attention to like the first time we hear a name, the first time we see a person, what's happening. And in the case of Rose, she's already sitting, right? She's already living her life. She's, eating her fries, enjoying a vibe, and it's Shane that stumbles into her, right? And that happens to sit there, and this woman is there, right? And so I think, and we just talked about where we see Svetlana, she's in the space, she's in his space, right? She rolls up in there, right? That's not what happens in the case of Shane, right? Shane is trying to figure stuff out and he sits down wherever and there she is, right? And so I love that that is the introduction that we get for her, right? That she is already existing, already doing her thing, and it's a boom type of situation, you know, like two things to collide,
Yeah.
right?
He
And
stumbles into
that's the
her.
way that they end up, literally, right? And that's how he needed it to happen,
Yeah,
because he's
good
not
point.
the type of person who he's going to go out and do, even if he thought he was going to do that. Shane's not doing that. Okay, so
Right.
so he
He literally
literally
was trying to
needed
get
it to
away from it
happen.
all.
Exactly, right. It was like,
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah.
he was not doing it. He was like, I'm gonna go anywhere. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, and happened to sit down and she's there. That's a woman who's already knows herself, right?
Yeah.
Is already immensely confident, right? And is now and navigates that conversation from small talk to big talk very quickly. Right.
Yep.
It's like 1 second of like hello, and the next thing she's like, when I was 8. You know what I mean? So they like get into it really fast, which I love, because I think Shane, if I'm thinking about like me, you know, myself as somebody who's neurodivergent and will go into deep conversations very quickly, you know, I'm not surprised that, you know, Shane is like, I have no idea how to navigate. Like, well, what's the weather and the blah blah blah, and I don't know any of that. But like, I can actually, even if it's awkward, get into the real things, right? I can talk about what's really happening in my life because it seems like you're a safe person that I'm able to communicate with. And so Rose's presence is so necessary to just give him someone who can pull things out of him, you know, a little bit more, to just asking questions and just sit there. But he needs, you know, somebody who's going to coax that out of him a little bit more, and give him space to talk about things that we don't even hear him talk about with other people. She brings up the fact that he's probably one of the only Asian, you know, kids who would have been playing hockey, right? We don't hear that at any other time besides with his mom, you know, and so
And
he
you
gets
know that's like a
those
fundamental, pivotal thing for
yes.
him. Like you
Mhm.
said, Shane just needs someone to move the conversation. Like, just talk about
Yeah.
your deepest feelings right now with me. She's subtle, but she doesn't let him stop the conversation. Whereas
No.
Svetlana's approach, it's much more subtle, but both
Mhm.
do what they need to do for their friends. Like they provide the sort of shepherding, in your words,
Yeah.
like that their friend needs at that moment.
Absolutely. And he wants to be able to talk about all these things. He
Yeah.
wants to be like the, you know, hot and horny guy that Ilya wants. Like he wants to meet him there, right? Like he
Right.
needs someone to be like, we're doing this now. You know, like
Right.
you can't run away. Like this is happening. We're talking about it right now. And so that conversation matches that, right? Where you know, she asked about that. Like, has it stopped being fun? Right? Nobody's asking him that. Who's asking Shane if he's
Right.
actually having a good time playing hockey,
No
right?
one.
Everybody knows he loves hockey, right? Assumes he loves hockey, is talking to him about it all the time, but nobody's like, Are you liking this right now? You know, like,
Yeah.
how is it going? You know, how are you feeling? And so us just being able to get that, I loved that, because that we wouldn't really know Shane without that conversation he has with Rose, right? We wouldn't
Yeah.
know that he's struggling with how to cope with the intensity of hockey. We don't know how he's feeling really about still being one of the only players of color within the entire league. You don't really know that. And she's like, I'm getting into it. Like, let's get
Yeah.
into it right now. Like, I know you. We're talking. We're getting to know one another. And this is important, right? Like you're a person, right? You're not just an athlete. And Rose absolutely does it, because Shane doesn't talk.
No.
I know.
So, you know,
No.
like if we don't get her talking, like we wouldn't hear any of that.
I
Yeah.
also, one of the things that I really enjoy about Rose is she's so confident and also curious, and her checks her like ego out of the
Mhm.
situation. I'm talking about specifically, you know, the scene at the restaurant where he essentially is coming
Yes.
out to her. And she's like, you know, most of the dudes that I've been with have a different reaction to me in bed. And you're like, yeah, girl. Okay. So she knows, like she knows what she's going to inspire. And, and you would think, oh, like it could derail into like, you don't think I'm hot? Like that's your
Yeah.
problem. But it doesn't, because
Right.
and nor would I think that at that point, like knowing Tyranny's direction and style, like I knew it wouldn't devolve in that, but I just thought it was such a beautiful balance of like
Mm.
her knowing herself as a person and still being an ally by removing herself from his like coming out story. You know what I
Yes, like it
mean?
wasn't about her. It wasn't about
No.
her. You know,
And
like she's the conduit, right? But it's
yes.
not to say like you're hurting me by doing this. It's like I'm
Yeah.
seeing something that I
Something.
want to ask about. You know, is
Yeah.
like really what it is. And so she's like, I just want to clear things up. And also the piece of it I loved is like, I don't think we can keep trying, right? Like
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
recognizes like this isn't working, so we're gonna stop doing it, right? Like we're
Yeah.
not gonna keep
Yeah.
figuring it out, right? So
Yeah.
she's an advocate of herself enough to be
Yeah.
like, you know, maybe it was working. I don't really think so. So we're going to stop. But also now this is completely your space, right? This is your
Yeah.
space to, you know, say or do what you want, even if it's nothing, right? But it's also like, we're not going to keep pretending to do a thing,
Right.
right? Like
Yeah.
we're, you know, like she's secure enough in herself. And so I love how she navigated that
Me
conversation.
too.
And it makes us confront you know, both misogyny and internalized misogyny
Yeah.
with that, right? Because there's so many of us who I'm sure went into that, like, oh my God, she's gonna be mad, you know, he's gonna freak out. We don't know what's going on. And it's like, no, I'm fine. You know,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
no,
Right.
like
It
I see
was
what's
truly
going on.
beautiful. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was truly
it really
beautiful.
was.
I think prior to that, he keeps bringing up that he loves talking to her, and I think that is
Hmm.
important, right? Because he loves talking to her because she feels safe and understands
Yes.
him. When
Hmm.
she gives him the space, she keeps saying, you don't have to. Nope, you don't owe
Yes.
me anything." Like, and that you could see his like nervous system calm down because
Yeah.
Hmm.
when he's like he realizes, "Oh shit." Like she knows. And
Yep.
then he's like, "I'm gonna have to talk about this." And she's like, "You really don't. You actually really don't," you know?
Yeah.
He then does talk about it a little bit because she
Yes.
gently says, like, "Can I ask you something? Like, have you ever been with a man?" And he's like, "Yeah." And then he tells her all this stuff. And she created that. And that is and I mean, we could talk all day long about your best moment there, but for me, that was one of the most tender, most beautiful
Hmm.
moments of the show.
What really struck me, because you had brought up the neurodivergence piece, and there's this idea that with people who are autistic, that you want to avoid demands because
Yes.
demands spark the nervous system. And if you just think about it, like you don't even need to have any sense of being neurodivergent, but if you're heightened up here, like that one thing, brush your teeth, pushes you over, right? Like,
Hmm.
so if your neurotype is always having to fight the world and you're always up here, that demand to share yourself, or even if it's a pleasant thing, even if it's like,
Yes.
I want to know about you because I'm interested in you, that is a demand because you have to
Hmm.
respond to that. And something intrinsically about Rose, she lowers the demand. And I just thought
Yeah.
about it that way now because of what you said, Diana, about like she keeps saying you owe me nothing.
Right.
And so
Yeah. The
she
Right.
reassurance. Yeah. The reassurance that
immediately
they're
says no demands from me,
Mhm.
and maybe that's why.
Yeah.
yeah,
Because
I was like, and then it becomes easier. Yeah, because at that point it's like, okay, you know, I can say
yeah,
it, I cannot say it. And
right.
for Shane, that's perfect, right? Like that moment, somebody giving him an out is
Yes.
generally what he's in. You know, like it's
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, right. Like
Yeah.
that's the moment where he's like, okay, well, now I can decide what it is that I need to do. And if we think about the way that his life is structured, he doesn't have many of those opportunities, right?
Mhm.
He
Mm-mm.
is constantly being told what he needs to do, or he just knows what he needs to do, right? And is thinking about that. And so when somebody gives him that choice, right, even if it's scary now to like lean into saying exactly who he is, or in the cases with Ilya, he's like leaning into desire because that's the, you know, that is what he's being presented with. He is then, you know, willing to do that, right? Even if it's
Mhm.
a scary thing, he is fine, you know, at that point saying like, okay, you know, like this feels like it's safe enough for me to do whatever it is that I want to do. And so those reassurances, you know, echo a lot of the consent, right, that we hear in those intimacy scenes, right, where there's opportunities like, are you okay, right? All of
Right.
these check-ins that you know, Ilya is doing, you know, that's what Rose is doing, right? And consistently doing that because she recognizes, you know, where those nerves will pop up and things like that, and doesn't want him to feel like he has to share his whole life, but know that I am a person you can share your
Yeah.
life with.
Yeah. And like she even says in the end, let's be friends. Like I not
Yeah,
only
like
like
real
not
friends.
like fake friends, like
Uh-huh.
good friends. Like I know I have a feeling that you don't have
Uh-huh.
really anyone to talk to about things and stuff. And he's like, yeah,
Yes.
things and stuff could be tricky for me. So like
Uh-huh.
not
Mhm.
only does she give him space, but she's like, I want to be there for you permanently. Like this is non-negotiable. We are now
Yeah,
friends.
exactly. Yeah, like we're in this now, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
so and that's what he needs. You need people
Uh-huh.
who fully opt into you. He needs that. He can't do light things, right? He needs like somebody who's like, I'm sticking to you like glue, right? I am here all the time, right? And that allows him to release some of that pressure, just like you were saying, right? To feel like there are no demands there. He could just
Yeah.
be whoever he wants to be, and we see that, and we're going to see that even more, in season two,
Yeah.
where life is going to add more of that pressure, right? The
Yeah.
fact that he and Ilya have now chosen one another means like, okay, well, all the stakes are all the stakes, right?
Yeah.
So I'm also
Yeah.
excited to see, what role Rose will play in that, right? Because he still will need another person. They will still need these women, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's nothing that is set up with their love where it's like, okay, great. All you need is like this one
We're
person now. I'm
done.
like, what? I was
No.
like, y'all took almost 10 years to communicate. You
Right.
definitely are not done, and you're not going to communicate in season two. So
Right.
let's, figure this stuff
Yeah.
out. I think it's another opportunity to, again, externalize some of that internal dialogue that happens because, we know that because they're together, they're scared of being apart. And so that will lead them the same way that they were, scared that they would never be together and so didn't communicate, right? They're scared that just saying anything is going to break them up, right? And so
Uh-huh.
we know that they're, again, going to need these women to externalize whatever it is that they're feeling. Or at least showcase the fact that if they're really not talking to anyone, how alone they really are, right?
Yeah.
So even
Yeah.
them being pushed away is going to mean something because of the way Tierney has set them up,
Mm.
in season one. And that's stuff that I love, right? Where make their relationships consequential, right? These don't feel like just like, oh, you were just doing it there. Like you were there for the plot. Like, okay, cool. We're like, no, what's going on with y'all? Come back, help
Yeah.
them because they need help, And
They
so
need
Yeah.
help.
the fact that you
Yeah.
can get us to opt into them, particularly with Rose, who we meet it like halfway through episode
Yeah.
4 and is only in a little bit of episode 5.
Yeah.
So the fact that he's able to do this where we're compelled by these women understand their importance and their role in their lives and we want to see what happens because we know that they will still need them, I think is so huge. And it's a
Yeah.
testament to allyship, right? We know
Yeah.
that gay and queer men need women, right? And we know that that's just
Yeah.
what it is, right? It's always been like that. It's the
Yeah.
reason,
Mhm.
right? The L is first, right? In LGBTQ, right? And so we need women. And
Yeah.
so the fact that he made them so important, so consequential to the story, but mostly to just them as people, right?
Uh-huh.
It's not just that they feel like characters that we know and love. They feel like people, right? They feel
Yeah.
like people that we care very deeply about. We care about the relationships that they've built with these men is huge and feels real, right? It
Yes.
feels like what women do in real
Yep.
life.
It feels
And so
very
I think
authentic.
It
it
is. It's
does,
very
it
authentic.
is. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, what? Women helping men communicate? What?
Yeah.
And so
Never
it's
heard
like,
of
yeah,
that.
that's what we have to do. It's like any
Right.
kind of men, you're gonna be
Yeah.
doing that, and
Yeah.
so to be able to see it and not have it come at the expense of those same women.
Maxine, you mentioned they're not victims here, right? Like they're helping the men. Without the women, the men truly couldn't get to where they are in the show, in their lives and their relationships. But also, like, let's take a minute for the fact that, like, the women are still doing the emotional labor for the men in the story. They're not upset by it, obviously. They're not victimized
Mhm.
by it, but it's still like we always do it. We always do the
Yeah, like
emotional labor
that's
for men, for them to process their feelings, to allow them to grow. Like,
yeah.
geez,
Yeah.
figure this
I
out,
know.
boys.
Exactly, I
Yeah.
know. I was thinking that's the part that feels like the realist out
Real.
of all of
Yeah.
it. You know what I mean? Where it's like
Mhm.
Absolutely.
we got even closer to women that we see every day.
Yeah.
Where
Mhm.
it's like even if you get the most emotionally intelligent man, right? A woman is probably somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Multiple women
Somewhere.
are probably
Yep.
around there.
I love that sort of reciprocality that happened, right? Like that he is
Mhm.
portraying these women in this authentic way, because it is authentic. And he's saying, yeah, these women are doing the emotional work. A woman wrote this book.
Yes.
It's like that
Yeah,
parallel.
yes, literally,
Yeah.
yeah, and it makes total sense, when we get to especially when we get to Elena,
Mm.
right, and before we even get to who she is on screen, like, just the fact that, as, Jacob Tierney was writing Elena, the only person he thought of was Nadine Botman, right, so he knew this is, like, that's his friend, right, so he's like,
Mm,
"If I'm thinking about someone's day one
Yeah.
friend, this is my day one friend, right?
mm.
Who's a badass and who's gonna, like, who doesn't take any shit? Like, let's go. That's who I'm thinking about, and that's who's playing it, right? And she's playing not necessarily exactly herself, but definitely a version of herself. If you've seen any interviews or anything with her,
Yeah.
one of the big things that I focused on when I did my rewatch for
Mhm.
our conversation was like, how are they introduced? Right? She is a force of nature when she walks into the Kingfisher, and she
Mhm.
shows up and she's walking and she sits down in the booth, right? And she's cursing out Kyle, right? Immediately.
Yep.
This is how we
Yep.
meet her, right? And it's like, okay, well,
She's like a
Elena's here.
powerhouse when she walks in
Yeah.
there.
For me, I was like, well, the grown up has arrived.
Yeah.
Okay, is how I felt. I was like, all right, well, everyone else is doing whatever. The grown up is here now,
That's
and
such a
that's
funny
very
way to
much
look at it.
that's I was
Yep.
like,
Mhm.
and that's very much what it is, right? And even with her cursing Kyle out, he walks past and she knows the exact food that he wants to eat, and she gives it to him. She can be a little caustic, right? Have a little bit of a razor's edge, right? But that she's immensely kind. She is
Mm.
thoughtful, right?
Mhm.
Those are things we see instantly, right? And so her role in this is as the adult, right? Like we're in a rom-com in episode
Mhm.
3, right? And it's like, oh, this is all really cute. The music's
Yeah.
great. Everyone's
The meet
vibing.
cute.
And she's like,
Exactly.
what's going on? Like
Right.
what's really happening here? Like
Yeah.
let's figure it out. And
Yeah.
I also love the use of the television for us to get a sense of how she's feeling about this relationship. So she comes in, she turns the game on, right, and where Kip is starting to like have this conversation with her, and she's validating information. What does Maria think, right? Again, you're seeing her thoughtfulness, how she's approaching all of this, but you also see
Mhm.
that she's open to Scott and Kip. She turns it on, right? she
Uh-huh.
she
Yeah.
literally puts the game on, right? And so she understands, okay, I need to make space for whatever this is. He is into it. Maria's smarter than him. She says something's going on. Let's see how it goes, right? But then she also goes, well, what's the plan? Figure it out.
Mhm.
Get organized,
Yeah.
right? And when's his next game? If you want your life to go a particular way, do a thing,
Mhm.
right? And
She's
make it
like
that
step
way.
by step. Like she's literally
Yes,
leading
like
him step by step.
she's like, here we go. Let's
Mhm.
figure this stuff out, right? And so I love that that's how they establish, their friendship. She doesn't soften herself
No.
for this conversation. She's very much who she is. She's like, I'm just gonna ask what I ask. And I love the scene in particular because it doesn't feel like it's being played for the audience, right?
Right.
Like
Mhm.
the audience would feel like it needs her to be a little bit like be a little nicer, like you don't need to, be mean to him or and she's like, listen, this is how I'm really going to talk to you
Right.
Yeah. Like
about what's
this is
going on
our
here. Like,
relationship. Right.
yes, like this is how we interact. And so I love that she's able to be exactly who she is.
Yeah. Yeah. She feels like a much more like a pragmatic ally, right? Like she
Yes.
understands the high stakes of the relationship. She understands the situation, but her support is honest. Like it's
Yeah.
blunt. What is your plan with my Kip? We're gonna dance. I'm not taking no for an answer. And we're gonna
Correct.
dance and I'm
Yeah.
gonna tell you how I feel.
And it's
Yeah.
protective too. I mean, they're
Yes,
all
of course.
protective in different ways. I think her role is interesting because she's, these Ilya and Shane, they're not haven't come to terms with their sexuality. And Svetlana and Rose serve in that, they're friends with them. But that's different from Elena. And it's kind of
Mhm.
interesting to see that how that allyship changes when that role changes. The
Yeah.
way in which you demonstrate how to be someone who is a safe space,
Yeah.
but still open to the possibility, even though she's just like, what's the plan? You know,
Yeah,
like she's thinking
yes.
ahead, but that I loved that sort of juxtaposition of these three characters that we've been talking about, and her specifically being in a entirely different life role than
Yes.
Svetlana and Rose.
And
You
Rose,
know?
yes, because I was like, she's living a regular regular life. Like
Yeah.
she's a regular person, and
Yeah.
Brooke is a regular person, and I love that
Yeah.
we get, their entire friendship group, right?
Right.
They're just real people who are doing
Yeah.
things, and it is an ability for us to see what it's like to protect a life that is open. Right. Like we, in the other cases, right,
Mhm.
we're dealing with people who are trying to help them navigate living a life that is in the closet,
Mhm.
right? She is trying to protect him being outside,
Yeah.
right? She's like, I understand. And we don't know, what the journey
Where
was for
yeah.
him to get to where he is now, right? And so that could be, part of her being protective, or it could just be like, I see you, you're living your life. Your dad
Yeah.
knows what's going on. You're not having to hide anything from
Yeah.
any of us. I don't want to now have to see you having to navigate that.
Yep.
And I'm protective of that because
Yep.
that's who you are, right? Who we know you as right now is who you are. You will
Yep.
have to be a different person or a different version of yourself, if you decide to embark on this relationship. She knows what sports are like, right? So
Yeah.
it's not like she's like, oh, well, why can't you just be doing blah blah blah? Like she knows what time it is.
She
She
understands.
understands, right? She understands what the stakes are. But she wants her friend to be happy.
She doesn't want him to go back into hiding. And
Absolutely. That's not
No.
she's not interested in that at all. Right.
yeah.
And he knows that, which is why he's
Yeah.
like, oh, he's always jumping in and saying things
Mhm.
because he knows, what she's going to say. Like,
Yeah.
it's like you're in love with him, period.
Mhm.
Right? Like we're
Period.
not having a conversation about it. That's what's
Right.
happening. Right? Like,
Yeah.
what are you going to do about it now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if we're
Again,
already in
tell
this
me the
mess,
truth. Tell
tell
me
me the
the
truth.
truth.
Like, tell me what's
Yeah.
going on. Like, I have already
Mhm.
paid attention.
Yeah.
I know what's happening. Maybe, maybe other friends aren't saying anything. I'm saying something.
Mm.
Listen here. You're not
Mhm.
telling me things. You're not telling your dad stuff.
Yep.
Right.
What's
She's
going on?
already seeing him hide, and she's,
Yes.
like, picking up on these subtle cues before it becomes more overt, and she's
Yes.
noticing.
She's
Yeah.
noticing stuff, right? And they give us the time frame, right? In the first conversation they have, he says it's, that's not until 2 months away, right? And then she's saying,
Yeah.
you need to have a plan. You're not doing this in perpetuity. I'm not watching you spin yourself out, with the hope that maybe sometime in the future or at some point, you all will be able to be out, like she really wants him to be on a path to his happiness. She
Right.
knows
Yeah.
what his goals are, right? It's her who we hear say he gets the full ride to grad school, right? All of these are choices, right, that are
Mm.
made on purpose, right? For us to understand who's the keeper of information, right? Who knows things, who
Mhm.
says things, right? It's her voice we hear echoed over and over again. And
Right.
so she is the keeper of him, right? Like
Yeah.
she says that.
The
That's why she's the
keeper.
one who says like, what are your intentions? It's my kid,
Yeah.
right?
My
Like,
kip.
what are you
My
doing?
kip.
What are you doing with
Mhm.
my kid? And somebody needs to care for him in that way, especially, in front of Scott, right? He
Mm.
needs to see that. And he also needs to see that like he needs people. And the best way for you to see that you need people is to see other people show up for the
For
folks
their
that you're with.
people.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right? Like
Yeah.
he needed
That's a
to see that
great point. Yeah.
he needed to see that. Like somebody is showing up and saying, like, this is really cute, love it. What's going on? Then
So
let's
sweet,
like
but
let me see what's actually happening.
Right.
And so he needed to see that, right? Like that needed to be part of his journey, just like and she spoke life into him, right? He needed
Yeah.
to hear that. There's
I
no
was
kiss if she doesn't dance with him. That's
I
not happening.
totally agree, and I think she is a lot of the reason. I mean, we know, okay, Scott compared to Shane and Ilya are he's in a different part of his professional journey, yes.
Hmm.
But I really do I think you said it so beautifully that she was part of his coming out too, because
Yes,
she showed up, accepted, and like she showed the path to what it looks like when you're out in the open, in the
absolutely.
sunshine, right?
Absolutely. And she showed that she would be there for him,
For him.
right?
Yes,
Like that
because
is
you
not
also deserve it.
exactly, right? And so do you as a massive part of that. And that's for them, right? Like that's a conversation they're having with one another. Kip is
Yep.
watching them, right? But whatever they're saying is for them. She
Yep.
did not need to say that, which is why I love
No.
that she did,
Right,
right?
right,
She
right,
did
right.
have encourage him.
Yeah.
And so like that is also part of it that she already showed up. Like I'm here, right? Like you have to do right by my friends,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
if you do, I'm here,
Here for
right? Like
you.
it will be all of us, you know, it will be
Yeah.
all of us together.
Yeah.
And Scott absolutely needed that because he
Yeah.
doesn't have anyone, right? So he
He did
needed
not.
to know that like at the, you know, at the tiniest bit, at least I know it could be us, right? She already knows that information, right?
Yeah.
And he doesn't freak out, which is also another part, like that's something for us to pay attention to as well. Like he could have just been like, what's going on? Like now she
Yeah.
knows and da, 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 da.
Right.
He
Right.
didn't really do that. He was like, okay.
Yeah.
You know, and
Why
I
is
think
she up in
because
our
he also
business, right?
recognized exactly, I think he recognized who she is, right, as that force, you know, and saying like somebody's gonna clock it, you know, and
Mhm.
if this is the person who clocked it, it's fine. Like,
Right.
let's move the plot forward, please, you know, and that's really what the women do, you know, and she
Yeah.
absolutely does it because again, if that dance doesn't happen, if she doesn't tell him those words, right? The words we know that Jacob picked on purpose, right? For her to say,
Mhm.
none of the rest of this is happening, right? And if
Yeah.
that doesn't happen, then Shane and Ilya don't happen, right? And
Yep.
so again, we see like how consequential women are, right? Not just, you know, them showing up, but them saying what needs to be said, right?
Yeah.
And whether that's I'm always going to be here for you, so do what you need to do. I'm always going to be here for you, so say what you need to say. I'm always going to be here for you, so you better act right. Whatever it is, you know, like
Right.
they are the
Exactly.
ones to do that, and we need them.
Yeah.
And
You're
that's
right.
how these women show up for them, you know, and say like, I will wrap my arms around you, right? But you
Mhm.
still need to do whatever it is that you need to do.
You need
Like
to do
this, and
some of
like
the
I
work.
will do it, but also like
Yeah.
you do something.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Like without Rose, Shane may have never confronted the truth. Without Svetlana, Ilya may not have survived the truth, right? Without Elena and Maria, right? Like the world may never accept them around them,
Mhm.
right? So like their romances are held together by these women, you know, like because like we've said, women are gonna make the world go round,
Yes.
whether in whatever space that they're in. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. I think you're so wonderful and I love
Yes.
your theories and
Beautiful.
I love your analysis and your stories and how you write. I loved our conversation today. Thank you so much for coming.
Really
Maxine,
lovely.
tell people where they could find you.
Yeah. Tell us.
Yes, well, you
Tell
can
them.
Tell people.
absolutely. Well, you can find me on Threads at Maxine NYC. And then you can find me in terms of the writing it is that I'm doing, as well as podcast appearances like this on my website, which is MaxineIawrites.com.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
I love
awesome.
it.
Thank you so much.
Take
Have a
care.
great evening.
Take
Bye
care.
bye.
Bye
Bye.
bye.